we went to this meet, and I don't know, kind of qualified for Olympic trials, not meaning to, but, this meet was massive. I'd never been to a meet like this in my life. They have 2 Olympic-sized pools in Palo Alto, and they swim the men in one pool and the women in another pool. And after I had done this good time, I swam in a couple relays, and throughout this meet, it was like a 4-day meet, people kept coming up to me and they're like, oh, God, wouldn't it be great to see a 40-year-old in the Olympics? I'm like, yeah, who's going? Let's cheer him on, And then after a little while, they're like, well, it's you. I'm like, me? I'm not going to the Olympic Games. Like, well, you qualified for trials. You have to go. You have to represent us master swimmers. And, oh, my God, the badgering of these older people was just, like, so annoying that I finally was like, all right, I'll do it. Now, I'm the type of person that once the decision's made, that's it. Like, I don't go back. And so I'm like, whoa, did I just tell him I was really going to do this? And David, my partner, is like, you did? And I'm like, all right, well, let's just do this. And so I got back to Coral Springs, and I went to meet with Michael to see, can I finally be in your group? I have no baby. I'm, like, excited about this. He's like, no, you've been swimming well with Chris in the Masters group. You can swim with him. I was like, okay. And so he basically wouldn't let me swim with his group. I don't know if it was my age. I didn't know if he thought I wasn't dedicated and really wanted to do this. He obviously didn't know me. But whatever it was, it took him 7 months to let me swim with his kids. Even though my times were like seconds faster than what his kids were doing, he wouldn't let me swim with them. So when I decided to make this comeback, there were 2 types of people that I encountered when I was doing this. There were the type that would say, aren't you too old? And the first person to say that to me was Mayor Bloomberg of New York when I went to ask him for sponsorship. Good person to ask for sponsorship. I kind of looked at him, and when he said that, aren't you too old, when I said I was thinking about making a comeback, that was just fuel. Like, to me, when I hear something negative about me, that just fires me up to show that they're wrong, and they're going to be wrong, and I'm going to do everything I can to prove that they're wrong. So that stayed in my head, the aren't you too old phrase, while I was making this comeback for 2008. And then the other type was, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And that was mainly my family. But so those are the 2 types that I encountered when I was doing this. And, I started to think about it. It's like, you have Jack Nicklaus can win a Masters at 46 years old, or you have Nolan Ryan, who a lot of you men probably know, who pitched a no-hitter at 44 years old. Why can't a 41-year-old mom try for an Olympic team and make an Olympic team? And so that was kind of what my philosophy was, is people made such a big deal about my age, but as you'll know as my talk goes on, that I used age to my advantage. And I think the biggest thing for me was the negativity. Because if I was 21 years old and I had heard all these negative things, I'd freak out. I'd be like, oh my God, they're right, but I didn't. I had a different maturity level than a lot of the kids that I would train with or who I competed against. And so I used any kind of negativity to my advantage. So when Michael finally let me start training with him, I knew I was in for a long haul, because I remember one of my first workouts, I was in a lane with, I think it was like a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. And we finished a set, and they're girls, and one of them turns to the other, she's like, so who are you going to the prom with? And the other one's like, I don't know, are you going to take so-and-so? And I'm like, oh my God, what am I listening to, And I'm thinking, okay, what size diapers do I need for my daughter now? And, and so there was, it was just a vast difference. And I would ask some of the kids, I was like, so how old are your parents? Oh, I have 35. And I'm like, oh, great, And so it was interesting to be kind of put in there with teenagers, and I guess in a way I was kind of glad that I had to prove myself to Michael to be in there, because I think to start off with that conversation and my first workouts would have been like really hard, but I'd gotten into really good shape and I was ready to train with these teenagers. And the great thing about it is I didn't want some teeny boppers beating me in practice, let alone in swim meets, and they didn't want someone older than their parents beating them, so it actually was like a really good fit and a good mesh. When I decided to make this comeback, people would say, well, how are you going to do this? Well, I didn't know. I mean, when I decided to make it, the first thought in my head was, I need to do things differently. I can't train the way I trained. I tried for the first week with Michael's group to do what they were doing, to go 2 workouts a day and do that 4 days a week. And I mean, after 1 day of double workouts, that was it. And I used to do 9 workouts a week. But we had decided that I can't do what the younger kids are doing, that I had to do what was best for me. And so I had to change everything around. And that was really tough for me, because I'm so used to, if they're going to do that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it better. Or if they're going to do that, I'm going to do more and do it better. That was always my line of thinking. And so now I'm doing half the number of workouts that they're doing. And that can play on your psyche quite a lot. So I had to accept that. And when I sat down and talked to Michael about our strategy and what our plan was, I had to buy into it 100%. I couldn't just say, well, yeah, I kind of believe that, but nah, it's like I had to believe him and I had to have faith in him. If I didn't, I wouldn't have gotten to where I was. So to have that faith in your leader, I think is extremely important. And I think that's what's missing with a lot of kids is they don't necessarily communicate with their coaches and they don't believe in 100% in what the coaches believe in. And it's not to say that you can't voice your opinions, because I am very opinionated and I gave my opinions, but we work it out and communicate. And so I think that really worked to my advantage is knowing that I can do that with my coach. And I try to teach that to young kids, like they're so intimidated by their coaches, and they need to learn to communicate, because I think that's just huge. So when we sat down and decided a plan, the one thing that he wanted me to do was to get bigger. I'm thin. He wanted me to get muscle and be intimidating. And that's the way I trained in 2000 was the strongest person in the weight room and the strongest looking person in the weight room was going to be the strongest in the water. Well, that's not how it works. If you look at someone like Michael Phelps, he doesn't look like the strongest person out there, but he's the most efficient. And so the people I hired were really going to work on my efficiency. The first person was Andy O'Brien. He's a strength coach who's worked with hockey player Sidney Crosby since he was 13, and he works with all the top athletes in the world. And he happened to be a trainer for the Panthers down in Florida near where I live. And so I was introduced to him, and I'll never forget the first stuff we started to do was, like, he said, okay, show me what you do. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to show him, and I'm like bench pressing all this weight, and I'm doing squats and everything. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to change it around a little bit. And I thought he'd be like totally impressed, like, God, this girl's really strong and stuff. And so he gives me one thing to do, like lifting a weight like sideways, and it was like 2 pounds, and I couldn't do it. And I'm like, wait, but I just bench pressed like 150 pounds, doesn't it say anything? And he's like, no, that doesn't mean anything to me. And so he changed my whole philosophy, where he had to strengthen muscles that I didn't know that I even had. Swimmers are very front-oriented, so if you see swimmers, we always have a tendency to hunch over, because when we swim, we're grabbing the water and we hunch over. He wanted, when you're in the water, you want a perfect straight body. And so he had to work a lot of my muscles in my back, in between my scapula. And so one of the first things I did during my workouts, and my coach happened to walk in when I was doing this, and I had these 2-pound little dumbbells, and I was on a Swiss balance ball, and I'm laying on it. He goes, okay, do a T. And I'm like doing a T like this with the 2 pounds. And he's like, okay, do a Y. And I'm doing a Y. And I'm like, okay. But again, my philosophy is you have to believe in who's coaching you. And Michael had his way with things, and I believe in everything that he said. But I got an expert in the field of strength training to help me with that. And Michael's expertise is in the pool. And so when Michael walked in, he's like, what the hell are you doing? Is this what you're doing to get strong, And I'm like, and I'm like kneeling on a ball, like balancing, doing balancing stuff. And I'm like, yeah, as I'm balancing. And it was probably, it was like November of 2006. And my first really, really big meet was nationals in the summer of 2007. And so after I was done, and Michael was like shaking his head as he left watching us do the training, I believed in what Andy's philosophy was. So I went out to speak to Michael, and I said, look, we have until the summer of 2007 for nationals. Why don't I do his training up to that point in the weight room where he's an expert, and then if I don't do well at nationals, we can go back to your bench pressing and squats and everything else that you want me to do. And he said, all right, that's a deal. So I go to nationals, and I break 2 American records and win my events, and everything's good. And now he has his swimmers doing Andy's exercises. So I love when I'm right, too. It's just so much fun. And then I hired 2 stretching trainers. And my problem is that I would go and train, and I would get so heavy. And when you swim, when you see Michael Phelps swim, doesn't he look just so light in the water? And they're just like, they don't swim through the water, they swim on top of the water. And that's what you want to feel like when you swim. And so when I hired these stretching trainers, their goal was to just stretch away and rotate my muscles as they're stretching to get all the lactic acid out of my system. And so for me, they were more about recovery. Like, I didn't do it to get stronger, because you can stretch to get stronger. I did it for recovery. So I hired them. I had some massage therapists. I had a sprint coach. I mean, I left no stones unturned. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it 100% right, and I was going to hire the best people to help me get there. And when I decided to make this comeback, it wasn't just about me, because I had all these great people working with me. My role in this team was to stand on the blocks and do the swimming part. Everyone else had their own role. So to me, when I went up there and won that medal, it was really a team effort. It wasn't about me. And I knew that what I was going to do if I was going to qualify for the 2008 Olympic team would be special, so I had to hire these special people. And that is a big lesson I learned while preparing for the '08 Olympics, is that if I couldn't do it by myself. The key for me was putting together a team of people that were committed, who all shared the same goal. There were no egos there. My ego wasn't bigger than anyone. We all were on the same playing field, and I think that just was huge for me.